Come and look at this. For over a decade, I've been getting down to the South Island whenever I can and doing a bit of gold panning. I made all my own gear, and yesterday, you guessed it, I was at the dump and I found something that I can turn into gold prospecting gear. Let me show you. On top here is my homemade river sluice, but down below you'll see that I found this really sturdy, well-made golf trundler. Now, river sluice is designed so that you can carry it on your back or just in your hand and take it down to the river, but it's also the basis of what they call a Highbanker. A Highbanker is a pumped system where water recirculates and goes through it. And you can work out of the river with a battery and a bilge pump, and you can work without getting your feet wet. In other words, high on the bank. It's a Highbanker. So what I'm going to do is build a Highbanker using this trolley and my bottom sluice. So as well as the golf trundler, I've dug out a few other pieces that I'm going to be able to use in this build. Let's go and have a look. So I've had a scurry around here and I've decided that I'm going to donate this fuel can to the cause. It's a shame, there's nothing wrong with it. But I've discovered that by turning this thing upside down and cutting it along certain lines, it's going to make a really good hopper for me to put my pay dirt into and let the Highbanker do its thing. I've brought a bit of my matting in so that I can check my widths. This white stuff, these are the legs off a baby's changing table that I also found at the dump. Just a nice bit of lightweight square box section. And below that is the grill from a budget barbecue. Not cast iron, so not much good for barbecuing, but it's going to be perfect for what's called the grizzly plate. The grizzly plate's an extension to the sluice that allows water to drop straight through, but larger rocks tumble off the end and it gets them out of the way. I've also got myself a couple of pieces of aluminium here, and it's with those that I'm going to make the panel parts of the Highbanker. These are my folding bars. I made these about 25 years ago, I think, and honestly, they've served me well. I keep seeing people's designs for homemade sheet metal folders, and I do like the look of them, but honestly, they take up space in the workshop. These folding bars can just be dropped on a shelf or hung on a nail out of the way, and they're always there when I need them. I can do soft bends, I can do hard bends. I can only go up to about 500 millimeters long in one stab, but if I'm really cheeky, I can do it in sections and come in from either end. They work, and they haven't cost me any money to build, so I just keep using them. So what I'm doing now is modifying this fuel can, and the reason why I chose to use the fuel can will become apparent when I get this contraption all stuck together and outside and I connect the pump. Then I'll show you a pretty neat trick. I've had to put a slight taper on the aluminium sluice. It's 180 millimeters wide to match up with the other sluice at one end, but it's 160 millimeters wide where it connects up to this crash box that I'm making now. And I'm going to change my angle grinder disc because a large disc can't do a tight radius. I'm going to put one of my old worn ones on, and I can do a nice little tight radius and cut out this tongue that I need. And the tongue has to be bent slightly in one direction so that it will hold. Where am I? I've got some special. Here they are, my special vice grips with the wide jaws. There we go. Fold that up. That goes in there. I'm going to rivet that in now with some sealant, but I'll just take the edges off. making the grizzly plate here. The grizzly plate's the bars that hang off the end of the top sluice, so that any rocks over about 5 centimetres in diameter just roll off onto the ground, and all the goodies and the water continue to drop straight through the bars. Stainless steel washers, nuts and bolts here, because this is going to spend most of its life with water flowing over it by the hundreds of gallons. Right, now it's time to get a few rivets in here. Pre-drill the holes to make it easy. Just deburr them, and then I can offer up the plastic container, get some holes drilled. I'm now roughing up the surface because I'm going to put some urethane adhesive to make it watertight. I don't want water dribbling out and possibly taking my gold with it, so we want it all to be nicely sealed up. Urethane's one of the few glues that will stick to polypropylene, which is the rotationally moulded plastic. Urethane's like silicone on steroids. It's about $25 a tube, and it does go off. You can't open a tube and leave it for weeks and weeks unused. You've got to commit to using a tube once you've opened it. But it's really good stuff, and it will stick to most plastics. So I'm using my air rivet gun here, which is really fast. When you're doing hundreds of rivets a day, as I sometimes am with my cabin builds, it pays to have the right gear for the job. And speaking of the right gear for the job, I'm just discovering that I can't get that rivet gun inside the crash box. So I'll revert to one of my other rivet guns. This one's called a lazy tong. It's a really, really old style of rivet gun, but it's good for going down into deep cavities. Right, that's got the rivets nice and tight. I'll just smear out the excess urethane adhesive, make sure that everything is watertight. And now it's time to make the little brackets that are going to hold the legs. These need to be adjustable in 2 planes. They need to telescope up and down, so I'm putting in a captive nut system using riv nuts. Riv nuts is another kind of rivet, but instead of just holding things together, they insert a threaded insert into sheet metal so that you can have a heavyish bolt going through a piece of sheet metal, which you couldn't otherwise do unless you welded a nut to the back of it. But being aluminium, I can't do that. So 2 riv nut inserts into these 2 top hat pieces of aluminium, and now I'll just test those. They're fine, good, yep. What I'm going to do now is slot the mounting holes, because these things will also need to rotate because they move through an arc. As the adjustment rises and falls, they move through a slight arc. That means that the holes need to be elongated. A little bit of judicious filing. Do them in pairs so that they both end up the same and it saves time. And in a moment we can nip outside and I'll start assembling the whole thing and give you a test run, show you how it works. Now the cheapest way I've found of providing a long stainless steel eye bolt that's easy to adjust is to buy a shade sail kit with a couple of these small turnbuckles. This is my classifier. I made this from a design that I saw on the net, made by a company called Gold Hog. The idea of a classifier is that you can put whole shovelfuls of assorted river gravel into this, give it a quick shake, and all of the good stuff will sink straight to the bottom into that sump under the grate. And after 2 or 3 of those, you'll have something ready to put through your Highbanker. The Highbanker uses this 3,000 gallon per hour 12 volt bilge pump, and that lives in the end here. There's a sediment catcher, that's that second bucket that sits in there, and the Highbanker's adjustable. Depending on what water flow I'm using, I can alter the angle of both runs, and that means that the speed of the gravel over the riffles can be varied. So turning the pump on, we're ready to run some gravel and see what we can find. The whole idea of a Highbanker is adjustability. You can adjust the speed of the flow by changing the angles on the runs. You can alter the amount of water that flows down by restricting with the tap at the top. And of course, by changing the mats, you can change how you capture what you've got running through it. Now this is the crash box. This is the feature of the crash box that I really wanted to show you. Remember I told you about that handle that was underneath? That handle's providing me with a way of creating what they call a fluid bed. It's driving water down through the moulding of the handle and bringing it up, welling up from underneath, which is once again picking up the fines and distributing them across the sluice, meaning that as it runs down through the sluice, it's widely spread across its entire width and should give me a really nice distribution on the way down. Here you can see how the grizzly bar works. The grizzly bar just simply lifts anything that's bigger than about 1 centimetre out of the flow and passes it to the end. But it sort of pauses, gives me a chance to identify things before they drop off. On the left you can see a nice little piece of quartz that's possibly got some zones of enrichment contained within. The whole idea of the riffles and the mat inside a sluice is to slow down the flow of the water and create turbulence. Where the turbulence occurs, the heavies drop out. By progressively slowing the flow of the water, different heavies will drop out at different events. Until the end, it's the floaties that get caught. Now earlier I put the large magnet underneath the sluice and that's trapped all of that lovely black sand and made it a lot simpler to pull out everything else by removing the black sand first. I've left the sluice to dry and you can see how things have built up behind each riffle. Now these riffles are very high. This is my biggest riffle bar. But you can see progressively how there's less and less behind each riffle until we've only got the trash at the very, very bottom. What I do now is run these fines through a pan to see what I've been left with. And then we'll give the mats a wash and wash the sluice itself out and we'll see what the Highbanker's actually trapped. Right, let's get the riffle bars out of here. These are my highest riffle bars. I've got 3 sets, and depending on what I'm running through the Highbanker, I put different bars, ladders in there, and underneath the ladder I have either artificial grass, miner's mat, or marine carpet. Today I'm running marine carpet, which is like a shorter, denser version of artificial grass, whereas miner's mat is it's almost like a bowl of tiny noodles all wound up together, and that grabs absolutely everything, but it is very hard to clean. So we'll just knock the sand off the mesh here. Having the mesh on top of the mat just helps to hold whatever drops into the mat down into the mat. There you go. I didn't expect to find any gold in what I've been putting through because this is sand from my yard. What I did expect to find was flakes of rust and lots and lots of black sand, which is magnetic. And you can see how the Highbankers pulled out, and you can see how the Highbankers separated and all of the individual gravels and sands that made up what it was that I put through. We had the bigger rocks falling off the end, all the floaties, the leaves and dead twigs and things like that floated right to the end. The heavy sank first, the sand and the black sand, that got trapped inside the mat. Most of the black sand's been pulled out by the magnet, which is a huge help. If I'd been in a river situation, I'd hope that this final pan would be the home of a few specks of gold. You want to see some gold? In an upcoming video, I'll be going down to one of our local rivers where I've been told you can find very small pieces of fine flour gold. So join me on that adventure in a few weeks and we'll see what we can bring home.